The scream of twisting metal was the only warning. Kalen Thorne didn't calculate the trajectory or the kinetic force of the falling support beam. He simply lunged, his human frame a desperate, singular shield over Archon Vora as the bridge's spine snapped. Beneath the raining sparks, the Predator and the Protector became the same thing. Would you risk the stability of an entire empire for a single, instinctive choice? 30 cycles earlier, the only sound in the glass monolith was the rhythmic, clinical hum of the Judgment Lattice. Kalen Thorne stood at the center of the obsidian floor, his posture far too rigid for a man facing ruin. Elian watched from the junior scribe's bench, his own fractal markings flickering with a nervous, pale yellow light. It was his first time seeing a human in the flesh. To a vitrine, the species looked unfinished, their skin matte and dull compared to the Archon's luminous amethyst glow. Elian's stylus hovered over the datapad. He found himself mesmerized not by the charges, but by a small, mundane detail. A single, fraying thread hung from the shoulder of the human's formal uniform. It bobbed with every breath Kalen took, a tiny vulnerability that seemed to mock the grandeur of the tribunal. Archon Vora Solis sat atop the translucent star opal dais, her 8-foot frame casting a shadow that felt like a physical weight. Her corona rings drifted slowly beneath the surface of her eyes, a sign of deep, analytical processing. The charges were severe. Kalen had hijacked the Luminous Accord's tactical lattice, a crime that carried the penalty of total resonant disconnection. He had saved a relief frigate, but he had shattered 8 protocols to do it. In the heavy silence, the Archon's markings rippled. "Do you deny the unauthorized activation, Commander?" Kalen's voice was a rough contrast to the Archon's resonant clarity. "I did what I'm accused of," he said. "My choice wasn't between obedience and rebellion. It was between 6 people living or dying. I chose life." Elian felt a spike of heat in his own chest. He wondered if a sharp chime from the adjudicator's staff cut the thought short. The council erupted in a flurry of hushed, melodic whispers. To the vitrines, Kalen's logic was a virus. He was prioritizing emotional variables over structural integrity, an instinctual calculus that the Accord had spent millennia trying to erase. Elian watched Vora. Her markings didn't flare with the expected fury. Instead, they dimmed to a soft, contemplative violet. "Your punishment is confinement to the diplomatic quarters," Vora declared, her voice echoing through the impossibly high arches. The room went cold. Confinement in the diplomatic wing was a gesture of respect, not a sentence of shame. This is the moment where the rules of 2 civilizations begin to crumble. Subscribe to see how far the Archon is willing to fall. Through the monitors, Elian saw Kalen sitting on the edge of a bed that was far too soft for a prisoner. The human was holding a shard of porcelain, turning it over in his hands. It was white with blue flowers, a jagged relic that looked as out of place on the monolith as the man himself. Vora's hologram appeared, her formal regalia replaced by a simple, fitted garment. She looked less like a woman with an empire and more like a woman haunted by a question she couldn't calculate. "You act from instinct," Vora murmured, her image shimmering. "It is chaotic. Occasionally, it is absurd." Kalen looked up at the hologram. "It works, doesn't it?" Elian watched the data streams. The Xylos hegemony was moving in the shadows of the neighbor's rift, but the 2 beings on the screen were focused only on each other. The boy's markings pulsed with a dawning realization. This wasn't a confinement review. It was a gravitational pull. The bridge was a symphony of failing systems. Elian clung to his station, his markings strobing a panicked, rhythmic red as the Xylos cruisers bracketed the glass monolith. The air was thick with the sharp, acidic smell of burnt coffee from Kalen's overturned mug, a mundane ghost in the middle of a slaughter. Kalen was shouting over the roar of the atmospheric scrubbers, his eyes fixed on Vora with the intensity that made the surrounding vitrine officers flinch. It wasn't about the law, it was about... The deck buckled. A massive Xylos beam punched through the secondary shields, sending a shudder through the ship that felt like a tectonic shift. "Invert the core," Kalen roared, ignoring the strategists who were still debating the probability of survival. We drop into the rift, or we die in the light. Would you trust a stranger's gut feeling when every machine you own says he's wrong? Vora didn't hesitate. She gave the order, her amethyst eyes locking onto Kalen's with a terrifying, absolute trust that made Elian's fractal markings dim in awe. As the massive flagship surrendered to the gravity of the nebula, plunging into a swirling abyss of ionized gas and kinetic lightning that tore at the hull with the ferocity of 1,000 starving predators, the tactical lattice became a useless tangle of static. The ship plummeted. For a heartbeat, gravity failed. Then, the sensors screamed as the monolith hit the thickest part of the rift, its signature masked by the chaotic electromagnetic storm that rendered the Xylos targeting arrays blind and useless. And then, the bridge ceiling gave way. Kalen moved before the sensors could even register the structural failure, his body a blur of motion against the flickering emergency lights. The massive support beam, a mountain of fractured alloy and sparking circuitry, descended with the weight of an executioner's blade. The return was instantaneous. Kalen lunged, hitting the floor with Vora pinned beneath him, his human muscles straining against the impossible weight as the impact sent a shockwave through the deck. "Kalen," she whispered, her voice a fragile frequency beneath the din of the alarms. He didn't pull away. He couldn't. For 3 long seconds, the Archon of the Luminous Accord and a disgraced human. Human commander existed in a space where protocol was dead. The silence between them was louder than the battle outside, a shared breath amidst the ruins of an empire. Reality only snapped back when the stabilizers roared to life, pushing the ship upward from the blind spot of the rift to deliver a final, devastating blow to the unsuspecting Xylos flagship. Later, after the Xylos fleet had retreated into the dark, the bridge was a graveyard of status symbols. Elian watched them from the shadows, his young mind struggling to categorize the fear he felt. Fear not of the enemy, but of the unpredictable human spark that now sat at the heart of their throne room. The Archon stood among the ruins, her hand resting briefly on Kalen's shoulder before she turned to address the survivors. The humans simply knelt by a pile of debris, picking up a single, sharp fragment of porcelain with blue flowers. The blue petals were stained with a dark, human red. The laws of physics are easy to follow, but the laws of the heart can tear an empire apart. Tomorrow, we witness the fallout.